Kokoro, Natsume Soseki. Part 2. My Parents and I. Chapter 1. When I returned home, what surprised me was that Father's health had not changed very much from the time I had seen him before. "Oh, you've come back, have you? Well then, it is certainly a good thing that you were able to graduate. Just wait a moment. I am going to wash my face." Father had been outside in the garden, doing something there, with the grimy handkerchief which he had tied to the back of his old straw hat as a shield against the sun, fluttering behind him. He went around toward the rear, where the well stood. I, who had regarded graduating from school as something perfectly natural for any ordinary person, felt abashed before a father who rejoiced in it more than I had expected. "It is certainly a good thing that you were able to graduate." Father repeated these words again and again. Inwardly, I compared this joy of my father's with the look on Sensei's face when he had said, "Congratulations," at the dinner table in his house on the night of the graduation ceremony. To me, Sensei, who congratulated me with his mouth while seeming deep down to despise me, appeared rather more refined than my father, who delighted so curiously in something that did not amount to very much. At last I began to feel irritated by the rustic crudeness that sprang from my father's ignorance. Graduating from a university is not such a great thing. Every year there are hundreds of people who graduate. At last I spoke in this way. Then Father made a strange face. "It is not simply that graduation itself is a good thing. Of course, graduation is a good thing, but what I mean has a little more meaning than that. If only you understood that." I tried to hear the rest from Father. He seemed unwilling to speak of it, but at length he said this: "In short, it means that it has become a good thing for me. As you know, I am ill. When I saw you last winter, I thought that perhaps I had only until March or April left, and yet, by some good fortune, here I still am today. I am still able to live and move about without difficulty, and now you have graduated. That is why I am glad. For a parent, it is surely happier to see the son he has devoted himself to raising leave school while he himself is still alive and well, than to have that son graduate after he is gone. From your point of view, with the grand ideas you have, you may not find it very interesting to hear someone say, 'Good, good,' over something as small as graduating from a university. But look at it from my side. The position is a little different. In short, your graduation is more of a good thing for me than for you. Do you understand?" More than apology, I felt ashamed, and sat there with my head bent down. It seemed Father had calmly prepared himself for death while he was still in health, and it seemed as though he had already determined that he would die before I graduated. Without once considering how deeply that graduation would strike Father's heart, I had been utterly foolish. I took my diploma out of my bag and showed it with great care to Father and Mother. The certificate had been crushed by something and had lost its original shape. Father carefully smoothed it out. One ought to carry a thing like this rolled up in one's hand. "You should at least put it in something," Mother added from beside us. Father gazed at it for a little while, then stood up and went to the alcove, placing the diploma prominently at the front. where it would immediately catch anyone's eye. Ordinarily, I would at once have said something, but at that moment, I was altogether unlike my usual self. Toward father and mother, I felt no impulse at all to oppose them. I said nothing and left everything to father as he pleased. Once it had taken on the habit of curling, the diploma, made of Toronoko paper, would not easily submit to father's will. No sooner had he placed it in what seemed a suitable position than it at once, recovering its natural tendency, tried to fall over. Chapter 2. I called mother aside into the shade and asked about father's condition. Father seemed so well, going out into the garden and doing things like that. But is it really all right? It seems there is nothing wrong with him now. He has probably gotten mostly well. Mother was surprisingly calm, like women who live among forests and fields, far removed from the city. Mother was completely ignorant in matters of this kind. Even so, I could not help feeling, inwardly, that it was somehow strange that when father had collapsed before, she had been so startled and had worried so much. But didn't the doctor declare then that his case was hopeless? That is exactly why I think there is nothing so mysterious as the human body. The doctor spoke so gravely about it, and yet here he is, still bustling about. At first, your mother worried too, and thought we should keep him from moving as much as possible. But you know his disposition. He takes care of himself, certainly, but he is stubborn. Once he is convinced that something is good for him, there is no sign at all that he will listen to anything I say. I remembered father's manner and the way he had behaved when I came home before, when he had forced them to put away the bedding and had shaved himself. Thinking of the words he had spoken then, "It is all right now. Your mother simply makes too much of it," I could not bring myself to blame mother alone. I was about to say, still those around him must be at least a little careful, but in the end I held back and said nothing. I only told her, as best I could, what I knew about the nature of father's illness, but most of it was no more than material. I had learned from Sensei and Sensei's wife. Mother showed no sign of being especially moved. She only said, "Oh, so it was the same illness, after all. How pitiful! How old was that person when he died?" Since there was nothing to be done, I left mother as she was and turned directly to father. Father listened to my warnings more seriously than mother had. "What you say is true, just as you say. But my body is, after all, my own body. And as for how it should be cared for, with regard to this body of mine, I ought, through many years of experience, to understand that better than anyone." That was what he said. Hearing it, mother gave a bitter little smile. "There, you see," she said, "but father has at least made up his mind properly, in his own way." The reason he was so delighted that I came home now after graduating is entirely that. He told me himself that he had thought I would probably not graduate while he was still alive, and that now, because I brought my diploma home while he was still in good health, that is what makes him happy. Well, now, he may say so with his mouth, but in his heart he still believes that he is all right. Do you think so? He means to live another 10 years or 20 yet, though from time to time he says uncertain things. Even to me, he says, "At this rate, I cannot have very long to live. When I die, what will become of you? Do you intend to stay alone in this house?" All at once, I imagined this old, spacious country house, after father was gone and mother alone, was left behind in it. If father alone were taken away from this house, could it go on as it was? What would my elder brother do? What would mother say? And if I thought of such things, could I still leave this soil behind and go on living lightly in Tokyo? With mother before my eyes, I suddenly remembered, by chance, Sensei's warning. The warning that, while father was still strong, I should have divided and received whatever was to be divided and received. No, you can rest easy. There has never been a case of a person who goes about saying, "I am going to die. I am going to die," actually dying. As for your father, too, while he keeps saying he will die, there is no knowing how many years he may yet live. More dangerous than that are the strong people who say nothing. I listened in silence to these commonplace words of mother's, words that seemed to come either from logic or from statistics. I could not tell which. Chapter 3, Part 1. There arose, between father and mother, a plan to cook sekihan and entertain guests for my sake. From the very day I came home, I had inwardly feared that something like this might happen. I refused at once. Please do not make such a great fuss. I disliked country guests. They were the sort of people who, if anything at all happened, would all gather together, coming with the air of making eating and drinking their final purpose. Ever since I was a child, I had felt uncomfortable attending upon them at their gatherings, and if they were to come for my sake, I imagined my discomfort would be all the greater. Yet before father and mother, I could hardly bring myself to say that they should not gather such boorish people and make a commotion. So I merely insisted that it was making too much of the matter. You keep saying it is too much, but it is not too much at all. This is not something that will happen twice in a lifetime, and of course one ought at least to entertain some guests. Do not be so reserved. Mother seemed to regard my graduation from the university with almost the same gravity as if I had taken a wife. It would be all right not to invite them, but if we do not, they will only say something again. These were father's words. Father was concerned about their backbiting, and in truth, they were exactly the sort of people who, if things did not go as they expected, in such a case, would at once be ready to say something. The country is troublesome, unlike Tokyo. Father also said, and your father has his standing too, mother added again. I could not very well insist on my own way. I began to think they might do whatever suited them best. If it is for my sake, then all I mean is, please let it be. If, however, your intention is that you dislike having people say things behind your backs, that is another matter. There is no use in my forcing a claim that would work to your disadvantage. It is difficult when you put it so logically. Father made a bitter face. It is not that your father is saying this is not being done for your sake, but surely you too understand, at least the obligations one owes the world? When it came to this, Mother, being a woman, spoke in a confused and stumbling way. But in place of that, as far as sheer quantity of words was concerned, even Father and I put together were no match for her. When one is educated, one becomes altogether too fond of logic. Father said only this much, yet in this single simple sentence, I saw the whole of the dissatisfaction he ordinarily held toward me. At that time, without noticing the sharpness in my own way of speaking, I thought only that Father's dissatisfaction was itself unreasonable. That night, Father changed his tone again and asked if guests were to be invited, on what day it should be done, to suit my convenience. For him to put such a question, to me, who was doing nothing but idling and sleeping and waking in the old house, with neither convenient nor inconvenient engagements, was the same as his yielding to me. Before this gentle father, I bowed my head without being obstinate. After consulting with him, I fixed the date of the invitation. Before that day had yet come, a great event took place. It was the report of the illness of the Emperor Meiji. This event, which the newspapers quickly spread through all Japan, blew away like dust. The celebration of my graduation, which, after passing through certain turns, within a single country house, had only just been about to settle into shape, it would probably be better for us to refrain. Father, wearing his spectacles and looking at the newspaper, said this. He also seemed, silently, to be thinking about his own illness. I found myself recalling His Majesty, who had come in state to the university for the graduation ceremony, as in every ordinary year, only a short while before. Chapter 4. Within the stillness of that old house, far too spacious for so small a household, I unpacked my trunk and began to open my books. For some reason, I could not settle my mind to turn the pages one by one on the second floor of that dizzying Tokyo boarding house, while listening to the sound of the tram running far away had given a greater tension to my spirit, and I had been able to study there with more comfort. I was apt, before I knew it, to lean against the desk and fall into a light sleep. At times, I would even deliberately bring out a pillow and indulge in a regular midday nap. When I awoke, I heard the cicadas, that cry, as though continuing on from the world of half-sleep, suddenly scraped and disturbed the depths of my ears with its harshness. As I sat listening to it, I sometimes felt sorrow rise in my breast. Taking up my pen, I wrote short postcards or long letters to this friend and that. Some of them remained in Tokyo. Some had returned to distant native places. From some, replies came. From others, no word arrived. Of course, I did not forget Sensei. I decided to send him about 3 sheets, written in a fine hand on manuscript paper, under the subject, as it were, of what I myself had been since returning home. When I sealed it, I wondered whether Sensei was in fact still in Tokyo. Whenever Sensei and his wife left the house together, it was the custom for a woman of about 50, wearing her hair cut short, to come from somewhere and watch the house in their absence. Once, when I asked Sensei who that person was, he replied, "What does she look like to you?" I had mistaken her for one of Sensei's relatives. Sensei answered, "I have no relatives." Sensei kept up no correspondence at all with the people connected to him in his native place. That woman, whom I had wondered about, the one who stayed at the house, was not related to Sensei, but was a relative on his wife's side. Whenever I sent mail to Sensei, I would suddenly remember the figure of that woman with her narrow sash tied loosely behind her back. If this letter were to arrive after Sensei and his wife had gone somewhere to escape the summer heat, would that old woman with the short-cropped hair have enough thoughtfulness and kindness to forward it at once to wherever they had gone? So I wondered, and yet I knew perfectly well that there was nothing of any real necessity written in the letter. I was simply lonely, and so I had counted on receiving a reply from Sensei. But that reply never came in the end. Father no longer wanted to play shogi as much as he had when I came home the previous winter. The shogi board, left gathering dust, had been pushed aside into a corner of the alcove, especially after the news of His Majesty's illness. Father seemed to sit wrapped in thought. Every day he waited for the newspaper to come and read it first before anyone else. Then he would purposely bring the paper he had finished to wherever I was. "Look here. There are detailed reports again today about His Majesty." Father always referred to the Emperor as His Majesty. It is a fearful thing to say, but His Majesty's illness must be something rather like mine. A deep cloud of anxiety hung over Father's face when he said this, and in my own heart, at such words, there flashed again the fear that Father might collapse at any moment. But it will be all right. Even a worthless fellow like me is still managing to go on like this. While Father himself offered this assurance of his own soundness, he nevertheless seemed to foresee a danger that might at any moment fall upon him. Father really is afraid of his illness. As Mother says, he does not seem to mean to live another 10 or 20 years. Mother looked embarrassed when she heard me say this. Try urging him to play shogi again. I took the shogi board down from the alcove and wiped away the dust. Chapter 5. Father's strength gradually declined. That old straw hat, with the handkerchief attached to it, which had so surprised me, came naturally to be neglected. Whenever I looked at it, resting on top of the black smoke-stained shelf, I felt sorry for Father. So long as he could still move about lightly, as he used to, I worried, wishing he would only be a little more careful. When he came instead to sit still in one place, I felt again that the former state had, after all, been the healthier one. I often spoke with Mother about Father's health. It is all in his mind. Mother said, in Mother's head, the illness of His Majesty and Father's illness were linked together. I could not think it was only that. It is not merely in his mind. Is his body really all right? It seems to me that not only his spirits, but his health itself is steadily getting worse. As I said this, I began inwardly to consider once more whether I should perhaps call some competent doctor from a distance, and have father examined. This summer must be dull for you too. You have finally graduated, and yet we have not even been able to celebrate for you. Your father's condition is as you see it, and then there is His Majesty's illness as well. Really, it would have been better to invite the guests at once, as soon as you came home. I had returned home on the 5th or 6th of July, and father and mother had first begun to speak of inviting guests to celebrate my graduation about a week after that, and the day finally chosen had been set more than another week ahead. Having come back to the unhurried country where time imposed no restraint, I was, because of that, as good as saved from the unpleasant pain of unwelcome social obligations. But mother, who did not understand me, seemed not to notice that at all. When the news of the emperor's death was announced, father held the newspaper in his hand and said, "Ah, ah, His Majesty too has at last passed away, and I as well." Father did not finish what was to follow. I went into town to buy black bunting. With it, I covered the ball at the top of the flagpole, and with it, I fastened a strip 3 sun wide to the tip of the pole, letting it project diagonally from beside the gate out toward the road. The flag and the black streamer as well hung limp in the windless air. The roof of the old gate at my house was thatched with straw. The color of the straw, beaten by rain and wind and blown upon over the years, had especially faded, taking on a pale gray cast, and even its uneven patches here and there caught the eye. I stepped outside the gate alone and looked at the black streamer, the white Marinsu ground, and the red of the rising sun dyed into that field. I also looked at the way they stood out against the dirty straw of the roof. I remembered that Sensei had once asked me, "What sort of appearance does your house have? Is it very different in character from my native place?" I wanted to show Sensei this old house where I had been born, and yet I was ashamed to show it to him. I went back alone into the house again. Coming to the place where my desk stood, I read the newspaper and imagined what distant Tokyo must be like. My imagination gathered itself into a single scene, that greatest city in Japan, moving restlessly in the dark, and in the midst of that anxious, murmuring city, which had no choice but to keep moving, even in its darkness, I saw Sensei's house like a single point of light. At that time, I did not notice that this light, too, was being naturally drawn into a silent whirlpool. I did not, of course, notice that before long. That light also stood with the fate before it of being suddenly extinguished. I thought I might write a letter to Sensei about this latest event, and I took up my brush. I wrote about 10 lines, then stopped. What I had written, I tore into small pieces and threw into the wastebasket. I thought there was no use writing such things to Sensei, and judging from past experience, he did not seem at all likely to send a reply. That was why I wrote letters, and I wrote them because I hoped a reply would come. Chapter 6. About the middle of August, I received a letter from a certain friend. In it he wrote that there was an opening for a teaching position at a middle school in the provinces, and asked whether I would go. This friend, out of economic necessity, was the sort of man who went about looking for such positions himself. This opening, too, had first come to him. But since he had been able to arrange for something better in another district, he had taken the trouble to let me know of this one, meaning to pass on to me what was left over. I wrote back at once and declined. I said that among our acquaintances there were surely some who were making strenuous efforts to obtain a teaching post, and that it would be better to turn it over to one of them. After sending my reply, I told father and mother about the matter. Neither of them seemed to object to my having refused it. Even without going to such a place, there will still be better openings, surely. Behind those words of reassurance, I read the excessive hopes they placed in me. My unsuspecting father and mother seemed to expect from me, freshly graduated as I was, a position and an income beyond what was fitting. An appropriate opening? These days, there are not so many desirable openings to be had. Besides, my elder brother and I studied different things, and we belong to different times, so it is a little unfair to think of the two of us in the same way. But now that you have graduated, you must at least be able to stand on your own. It puts us in a difficult position, too. If someone asks, "And what is your second son doing now that he has graduated from the university?" and I cannot answer, then I, too, am made to feel small. Father's thinking had never known what it was to go out beyond the old native place where he had long lived. Asked by this person and that from the same native place how much salary a university graduate might be able to earn, or told, well, perhaps about 100 yen a month. Would it be? Father wished to settle me somewhere in a way that would not look bad before such people. I, who thought with the great city as my base, must have seemed to father and mother a strange creature, walking with my feet pointed toward the sky. And I myself, too, at times actually felt like such a creature. Before father and mother, between whose world and mine the gulf was too wide, I remained silent, for openly declaring my own thoughts. Why don't you ask that gentleman you are always calling Sensei for help? At a time like this, of all times, Mother could interpret Sensei in no other way than that. But that Sensei was a man who had urged me, when I returned home, to have the property divided while father was still alive. He was not a man who would say, "Now that you have graduated, I will help arrange a position for you." "And what does this Sensei do?" father asked. "He does nothing," I answered. For a very long time, I had thought I had already told father and mother that Sensei did nothing. And father, I felt sure, ought to have remembered it. What can it mean that he does nothing? If he is a person you respect so highly, one would suppose he was doing something. Saying this, father mocked me. In father's way of thinking, those who were of use went out into the world, obtained suitable positions, and worked. He seemed to conclude that a man who did nothing was idle merely because he was, after all, worthless. Even a man like me, though I do not draw a salary, is not simply spending all his time in idleness. Father said that too. Even then, I still remained silent. If he is as great a man as you say, surely he will find some opening for you. Have you tried asking him? Mother asked. No, I answered. Then nothing can be done, can it? Why do you not ask him? You may write a letter, if nothing else. Yes. I gave that half-hearted reply and rose from my seat. Chapter 7. Father was plainly afraid of his illness, yet he was not the sort of man to trouble the doctor with tiresome questions each time he came. The doctor, too, holding back out of reserve, said nothing definite. Father seemed to be thinking about what would come after his death. At the very least, he seemed to imagine what our household would be like after he was gone. There is good and bad in giving children an education. After all the pains one takes to educate them, those children never come back home again. In that case, one might as well say that education is simply a means of separating parents and children. As a result of his education, my elder brother was now in a distant province, and by the fate of having been educated, I too had firmly resolved to live in Tokyo. The complaint of father, who had raised such children, was by no means unreasonable, and the picture he formed of mother left all alone in the country house where they had lived for so many years could not but have been a lonely one. Father believed absolutely that our house was something that could not be moved, and mother, living inside it, he likewise believed was something that could not be moved so long as life remained in her. To leave behind, after his own death, this solitary mother, all alone in our vast, empty house, was a terrible anxiety to him. And yet, in telling me to seek a good position in Tokyo and pressing me toward it, there was a contradiction in father's mind. I found that contradiction strange, and at the same time, I was glad that thanks to it, I would be able to go out again to Tokyo. Before father and mother, I had to make it appear as though I were seeking such a position with all the effort I could. I wrote a letter to Sensei, describing in detail the circumstances of the family. I asked him if there were anything he could do with his own strength to arrange something for me. I wrote this letter while thinking that Sensei would probably pay no attention to my request. I wrote it also while thinking that even if he did mean to pay attention, there was likely nothing he could do, being the narrow man of the world that he was. And yet, I wrote it believing that a reply to this letter would certainly come from Sensei. Before sealing it and sending it, I said to mother, "I have written to Sensei, just as you told me. Please read it." Mother, just as I had imagined, did not read it. Is that so? Then send it quickly. In such matters, one ought to do things promptly oneself, without waiting for others to remind one. Mother still thought of me as though I were a child, and in truth, I myself felt somewhat like a child. But a letter alone will not be enough. In any case, nothing can really be done until September, when I go to Tokyo. That may be so, but then again, There is no knowing whether some unexpectedly good opening may not turn up, so it is always better to ask as early as possible. Yes, at any rate, a reply is sure to come, and when it does, we can talk again. I trusted Sensei, who was punctilious in matters of this sort. I waited eagerly for his reply to arrive, but in the end, my expectation was disappointed. Even after a week, there was no word at all from Sensei. He has probably gone somewhere to escape the summer heat. I had to use words that sounded like an excuse when I spoke to Mother, and those words were not only an excuse to Mother, they were an excuse to my own heart as well. Unless I forced myself to assume some circumstance or other and defend Sensei's conduct, I grew uneasy. At times, I forgot Father's illness. There were moments when I thought I might as well go quickly to Tokyo at once. Father himself, too, sometimes forgot his illness. Though he worried about the future, he took no measures whatever for that future. I let pass the chance to speak to Father about the division of the property as Sensei had advised me to do. Chapter 8. At the beginning of September, I was at last about to go out again to Tokyo. I asked Father to continue, for the present, to send me money for my studies, as he had done until now. If I stay here like this, I cannot obtain the kind of position you speak of. I spoke as though I were going to Tokyo in order to obtain the very position Father desired. Of course, only until I find an opening, I added. In my heart, I thought that such an opening would never, in the end, fall upon my head. But Father, who knew little of circumstances, persisted in believing exactly the opposite. Well, it will only be for a short while, so I shall somehow manage it for you, but it cannot go on for long. As soon as you obtain a suitable position, you must become independent. Once a man has finished school, by rights, from the very next day, he ought not to be living at another's expense. Young people nowadays seem to know only how to spend money and never to think at all about how to earn it. Father said various other things besides. Among them were words like, "In the old days, parents were supported by their children, but nowadays, parents are only consumed by them." I listened to all these things in silence. When I thought the lecture was finally over, I quietly rose from my seat. Father asked me when I meant to leave. For me, the sooner the better. Have your mother choose the day. Very well. At that time, before Father, I was unexpectedly docile. I tried as much as possible to leave the country without opposing his temper. Father stopped me again. When you go to Tokyo, the house will grow lonely again. After all, there are only your mother and me. And that would be all right if only I were in good health. But in my condition, there is no saying what may happen suddenly or when. I comforted Father as best I could and returned to the place where my desk stood. Sitting there among my books scattered in disorder, I looked over again and again, in my mind, Father's anxious manner and his words. At that time, I heard again the cry of the cicadas, but the sound was not the same as I had heard all through the earlier part of the season. It was now the cry of the tsukutsukuboshi. When I returned home to the country in summer and sat still in the midst of the cicadas' voices, hot as though they were boiling, I often fell into a strangely sorrowful mood. My melancholy always seemed to sink into the depths of my heart together with the fierce sound of those insects. At such times, I would always remain still, alone, gazing at myself. Since I came home that summer, the tone of my melancholy had gradually changed, just as the cry of the abura zemi gives way to the cry of the tsukutsukuboshi. So too it seemed to me that the fates of the people around me were slowly beginning to move within some great wheel of transmigration. As I repeated to myself Father's lonely manner and his words, I found myself again thinking of Sensei, who did not send a reply even when I wrote to him. Sensei and Father, in the fact that they gave me impressions utterly opposite to one another, were easy to bring together in my mind, both in comparison and in association. I knew almost everything there was to know about Father. If I were to leave Father, then what remained between parent and child was only the lingering sorrow of affection. But much about Sensei was still unknown to me. Even the past of which he had promised he would one day speak, I had not yet had the chance to hear. In short, Sensei was still dim to me unless I passed through that dimness and reached a brighter place. My mind could not be at rest. For my connection with Sensei to be broken would have been, for me, a great pain. I had Mother choose the day and fix the date on which I was to leave for Tokyo. Chapter 9. Just as I was on the point of finally leaving, I think it was the evening of 2 days before, Father suddenly collapsed again. At that time, I was fastening up the trunk into which I had packed my books and clothes. Father had gone to take his bath. Mother, who had gone to wash Father's back, called me in a loud voice. I saw Father, naked, being held from behind by Mother. Even so, when he was brought back to the sitting room, Father said he was already all right. To be safe, I sat by his pillow and cooled his head with a wet towel. It was not until around 9 o'clock that I finally managed to eat a merely nominal supper. By the next day, Father seemed stronger than I had expected. Without listening to those who tried to stop him, he even walked to the privy himself. It is all right now. Father repeated again the very same words he had spoken to me when he collapsed at the end of the previous year. That time, as he had said, he really had turned out to be more or less all right. This time, too, I thought perhaps it might be so, but the doctor did no more than warn us that caution was essential, and no matter how closely I pressed him, he would not speak plainly. Because of my anxiety, even when the day fixed for my departure arrived, I could not bring myself to leave for Tokyo. Shall I wait and see how things go? A little longer? I asked Mother. Please do, Mother begged. Mother, while she saw Father well enough to go out into the garden or step down to the back door, would remain calm, yet whenever such a thing happened, she would again worry and fret beyond all necessity. Weren't you supposed to leave for Tokyo today? Father asked. Yes, I have put it off for a little while, I answered. Because of me? Father asked again. For a moment, I hesitated. If I said yes, it would be as though I were certifying the seriousness of Father's illness. I did not want to make Father's nerves oversensitive, but Father seemed to read my mind very well. I am sorry, he said, and turned his face toward the garden. I went into my room and looked at the trunk left lying there. It was still tightly bound so that it could be carried out at any time without the least trouble. I stood blankly before it, wondering whether I should untie the cords again. In that unsettled feeling of having risen halfway from my seat, without quite standing, I passed another 3 or 4 days. Then Father collapsed again. The doctor ordered absolute bed rest. What are we to do? Mother said to me in a small voice, so Father could not hear. Her face looked utterly helpless. I made ready to send telegrams to my elder brother and to my sister. Yet Father, lying there, seemed to be suffering from almost nothing at all. To see him talking, it was altogether as though he had merely caught a cold. What was more, his appetite was greater than it ordinarily was. Even when those around him cautioned him, he would not easily listen. If I am going to die anyway, I must at least eat something good before I die. To me, Father's words, something good, sounded at once comic and deeply tragic. Father did not live in circumstances where things thought good could be put into his mouth. At night, he would have them roast hard rice cakes for him and crunch away at them. Why is it that I crave things so much? Perhaps, after all, there may still be some sound part left in me. Mother, in her disappointment, placed her hope instead in that very thing. And yet, using that old-fashioned word, crave, which was employed only in illness, she meant no more than that he wanted to eat everything. When my uncle came to pay a visit, Father would not let him go, but kept him there for a very long time. The chief reason was that he felt lonely and wanted him to stay longer. But it also seemed to be one of his purposes to complain that Mother and I would not let him eat as much as he wished. Chapter 10. Father's illness continued in much the same condition for more than a week. During that time, I sent a long letter to my elder brother in Kyushu. As for my sister, I had Mother write to her. Inwardly, I thought that this would probably be the last message sent to the two of them concerning Father's health. So in both letters, I added that, if it should truly come to the final point, I would send a telegram, and that they were to come then. My brother held a busy position. My sister was pregnant. For that reason, until Father's danger was directly upon us, we had no freedom to summon them. Yet it would also have been painful if, after making all the effort to come, they should be told that they had not arrived in time. About the moment at which I should send the telegram, I felt a responsibility unknown to others. When it comes to anything that definite, I cannot tell myself, but at least you should understand that the danger may come at any time. The doctor, whom we had brought from the town where the railway station was, said this to me. After consulting with Mother, I decided, through that doctor's arrangement, to engage a nurse from the hospital in town. Father made a strange face when he saw the woman in white who came to his pillow and greeted him. Father had long been aware that he was suffering from a mortal illness, and yet he did not notice death itself, which was drawing near before his eyes. When I get better, I shall go to Tokyo once more for a visit. A man never knows when he may die. Whatever one wants to do, it is best to do it while one is still alive. Mother, having no choice, would humor him, saying, "In that case, you must take me with you too." At times, again, he would become terribly lonely. When I die, do take good care of your mother. I had a certain memory attached to the words, "when I die." The night I graduated, when I was leaving Tokyo, Sensei had repeated them again and again to his wife. I remembered Sensei's face with its faint smile and the way his wife had covered her ears, saying it was ill-omened. The words, "when I die," spoken on that occasion, had been a simple supposition. What I now heard was a fact that might come to pass at any moment. I could not learn from the wife how to behave towards Sensei. Still, at least with words, I had to divert Father somehow. "You must not speak so weakly. When you get better, are you not supposed to come and visit Tokyo with Mother beside you? When you come next time, you will surely be astonished. Even the new tram lines alone have increased enormously, and once the trams begin to run, the streets change of themselves, and on top of that, there are the city improvements. There is scarcely a single moment, day or night, when Tokyo stands still. Because I had no choice, I went on saying, even things that need not have been said. Father listened to it all with an air of satisfaction. Since there was an invalid in the house, there naturally came to be more people going in and out. Relatives living nearby came to visit in turns at the rate of about one person every 2 days. Among them were some who lived comparatively far away, and with whom, in ordinary times, we had little contact. There were those who went away saying, "I wondered how it might be, but at this rate, he will be all right. He can talk freely, and, after all, his face has not grown thin at all." The household, which, when I first returned, had been quiet almost to the point of desolation, gradually began to grow more and more restless through all this. Meanwhile, Father's illness, lying still in the midst of it, did nothing but move in an unhappy direction. At last, after consulting with Mother and my uncle, I sent telegrams to my elder brother and to my sister. My brother sent back word at once that he was coming. From my sister's husband, too, there came notice that he would set out. When my sister had been pregnant before, she had miscarried, and her husband, who had long since written that this time he intended to make her take every care so that it should not become a habit, might perhaps come himself in place of my sister. Chapter 11. Even in the midst of this restless uncertainty, I still had enough leisure to sit quietly. At times, there even came hours when I could open a book and read 10 pages in succession. The trunk of mine, once tightly fastened, had somehow been undone. Before I knew it, I took various things out of it as need arose. I looked back on the schedule I had resolved upon in my heart when I left Tokyo, the tasks I meant to carry out throughout that summer. What I had done did not amount to even a third of that plan. I had often, even before now, repeated disappointments of this sort. Yet there had seldom been a summer in which things failed to proceed as I had intended, to such a degree as this one. Though I thought this must be the common lot of human life, I was nevertheless oppressed by an unpleasant feeling. Sitting beneath this discomfort, I thought on one side of Father's illness. I imagined what would come after Father died, and at the same time, on another side, I thought of Sensei. At the two ends of this disagreeable state of mind, I saw the images of two men entirely different in position, education, and character. While I had left Father's pillow and was sitting alone among my books in disorder, my arms folded, Mother appeared. "Why don't you take a little nap? You must be very tired, too." Mother did not understand my state of mind, nor was I any longer such a child as to expect it of her. I simply thanked her. Mother still remained standing at the entrance to the room. "And Father?" I asked. "He is sleeping well now," Mother answered. Mother suddenly came in and sat down beside me. "Has your sensei still written nothing?" she asked. Mother believed what I had told her before. At that time, I had assured her that there would certainly be a reply from Sensei. Yet even then, I had not in the least expected that any reply would come, such as Father and Mother desired. Though I understood the matter, I had fallen into the same result, as if I had deceived Mother. "Try writing him once more," Mother said. No matter how many letters I might write, that would be of no use if it would comfort Mother. I was not the sort of man to begrudge the trouble. Yet to press Sensei on such a matter was painful to me, far more than being scolded by Father or putting Mother out of humor. I feared being looked down on by Sensei. There was even a suspicious thought in me that perhaps the reason I had received no reply until now to that request was of that very kind. There is no difficulty in writing a letter, but with a matter like this, nothing can ever be settled by post. I would have to go to Tokyo in person and ask directly, going about myself. But with your father in that condition, there is no knowing when you will be able to go to Tokyo. That is why I shall not go. Until matters are settled, one way or the other, whether he recovers or does not recover, I intend to remain here properly, as I am. That is only natural. Who could leave behind a gravely ill man who may at any moment be beyond help and go off to Tokyo as he pleased? At first, in my heart, I pitied Mother, who knew nothing, but I could not understand why she had brought up such a matter at such a restless time as this. seeing that I, setting father's illness aside, still had enough room in my heart to sit quietly or to read. I wondered whether mother too, forgetting the sick man before her eyes, had enough space in her breast to think of other things. Then she said, the truth is, I was thinking how relieved your father would be if your position were settled while he is still alive. At this rate, it may very well not be in time. But even so, as things still are, his speech is clear and his mind is clear. So while he is still like this, do your duty as a son and give him something to be glad of. Poor me. I was in a position where I could not perform such filial duty. In the end, I did not send even a single line to Sensei. Chapter 12. When my elder brother returned, father was lying in bed reading the newspaper. From ordinary times, father had always had the habit of glancing through the newspaper before anything else. But after taking to his bed, he wanted to read it all the more, out of sheer boredom. Neither mother nor I strongly opposed him, and we let the invalid have his way as much as possible. If he has strength enough for that, then it is a very good sign. I came thinking he must be much worse, but he seems remarkably well, does he not? My brother said things like this while talking with father. To me, that tone, too lively by far, sounded rather discordant. Even so, when he left father's presence and sat facing me alone, he was instead subdued. Should he really be allowed to read the newspaper? I think not either, but he will not consent unless he is allowed, so there is nothing to be done. My brother listened silently to my explanation. After a while, he said, "Can he really understand it?" It seemed that my brother had observed that father's powers of comprehension, because of the illness, had grown much duller than in ordinary times. That much is certain. I sat by his pillow for about 20 minutes just now and talked with him about various things, but there was not the least disorder in the way he spoke. At this rate, it may be that he will perhaps hold out for quite a while yet. The opinion of my sister's husband, who arrived shortly after my brother, was even more optimistic than ours. Father was asking him this and that about my sister. Since her condition is what it is better that she does not carelessly get on a train and jolt about. If she forces herself to come and see me, that will only make us worry here. He also said, when I get well, it will make no difference. I shall come out myself after a long while to see the baby's face. When General Nogi died as well, father was the first to learn of it from the newspaper. This is terrible, terrible, he said. We, who knew nothing of it, were startled by those sudden words. Afterward, I told him that, at that moment, I felt a chill, thinking at last his mind had truly gone wrong. My brother said to me later, I too, in truth, was astonished. My sister's husband added, in words that showed he felt the same. The newspapers of those days were indeed filled, day after day, with articles such as country people waited for eagerly. I sat by father's pillow and carefully read them aloud. When there was no time to read them there, I quietly brought them to my own room and went through every line. For a long time, my eyes could not forget the figure of General Nogi in his military uniform, nor that of his wife dressed in garments like those of a court lady, while a sorrowful wind blew even into the far corners of the countryside, shaking the drowsy-looking trees and grasses. I suddenly received a telegram from Sensei in a place where even the sight of a man in Western clothes would set the dogs barking. A single telegram itself was a great event. Mother, when she received it, indeed looked startled and deliberately called me out to a place where no one else was. "What is it?" she said, and stood beside me, waiting for me to open it. The telegram said simply that he wished to see me for a moment and asked whether I could come. I tilted my head. It must surely be about that position you asked him to help with. Mother guessed for me. I too thought that perhaps it might be so. Yet even so, it also seemed a little strange. In any case, having summoned even my brother and my sister's husband, I could not possibly leave father's illness behind and go off to Tokyo. After consulting with mother, I decided to send a telegram in reply, saying that I could not go. In words as brief as possible, I added that father's illness was falling into a critical state. Even then, I was not satisfied, so that very day I wrote out the detailed circumstances in a letter and sent it by post. Mother, firmly convinced that it was only about the position I had asked for, said, "When the timing is truly bad, there is nothing to be done," and looked regretful. Chapter 13. The letter I wrote was quite a long one. Both mother and I thought that this time, surely, Sensei would send some sort of reply. Then, on the second day, after I had mailed the letter, another telegram arrived, addressed to me. It contained nothing but the words that I need not come. I showed it to mother. "He is probably intending to write something in a letter." Mother seemed, to the very end, to interpret Sensei as a man who would arrange some means of livelihood for me. I too thought that perhaps it might be so, but judging from Sensei's usual ways, it somehow seemed strange. Sensei will find me a position. To me, that appeared almost impossible. In any case, my letter cannot yet have reached him, so this telegram must certainly have been sent before that. I said this obvious thing to mother. Mother, after pondering it with an air of reason, answered, "Yes, that is so." And yet it was plain that the fact that Sensei had sent this telegram before reading my letter was of no use whatever in helping us understand him. That day, the chief doctor was just expected to bring the hospital director from town, so mother and I had no further chance to speak of this matter. The two doctors, after consulting together, gave father an enema and then went away. Ever since father had been ordered to absolute bed rest by the doctor, both his bowels and his urine had been attended to, where he lay, by other hands. Fastidious by nature, father at first loathed this exceedingly, but since his body would not serve him, he had no choice and unwillingly relieved himself in bed. whether it was that the illness itself gradually dulled his mind or something else. As the days passed, he ceased to mind such slovenly evacuation. At times, he even soiled the quilts or the bedding, and while those beside him drew their brows together, he himself remained quite unconcerned. To be sure, the amount of urine, owing to the nature of his illness, had grown extremely small. The doctor worried over that. His appetite, too, gradually declined. Even when he occasionally desired something, it was only the tongue that desired it, scarcely more than a little passed below the throat. He no longer had the strength to take up the newspapers he loved so much. The old spectacles beside his pillow remained shut up for a long time in their black case, when a man named Saku-san, who had been father's close friend since childhood and who now lived about 1 ri away, came to pay a visit. Father said, "Ah, is that Saku-san?" and turned his clouded eyes toward him. "Saku-san, you have done well to come. You are strong, Saku-san, and I envy you. I am finished now. Why, you have had both your children graduate from the university. Even if you fall ill a little, there is nothing to complain of. Look at me. My wife is dead. I have no children. I merely go on living like this. That is all. Even if I am healthy, what pleasure is there in it? It was 2 or 3 days after Saku-san came that Father was given the enema. Father was delighted, saying that thanks to the doctor, he felt greatly relieved, as though he had gained a little courage with regard to his own life. His spirits improved. Mother, who was beside him, whether carried away by that or in order to encourage the sick man, spoke of the telegram from Sensei as though my position in Tokyo had already been arranged. Just as Father hoped, sitting there, I felt awkward and uneasy, but since I could not interrupt Mother's words, I listened in silence. The invalid's face brightened with pleasure. "That is excellent," said my sister's husband as well. "What sort of position is it? Do you still not know?" my brother asked. By then, I had lost the courage to deny it, giving some ambiguous reply, the meaning of which I myself did not understand. I rose from my seat on purpose. Chapter 14. Father's illness had advanced to the very edge of waiting for the final blow, and there, it seemed, it hesitated for a while. Those in the house went to bed each night thinking, "Will the sentence of fate be given today? Will it be given today?" Father felt no pain anywhere severe enough to torment those beside him. In that respect, nursing him was rather easy. For the sake of caution, one of us at least would remain awake in turn, but the others could withdraw to their own bedding at a proper hour, without harm. Once, when for some reason I could not sleep, I mistakenly thought I heard, faintly, something like a groan from the invalid. I got out of bed in the middle of the night and went, just to be sure, to Father's pillow. That night, it was Mother's turn to stay awake. Yet Mother herself had fallen asleep, her arm bent beneath her head for a pillow. Beside Father, Father, too, lay quiet like someone gently set down behind deep sleep. I crept back on silent feet to my own bed. I slept inside the mosquito net with my brother, my sister's husband alone, perhaps because he was being treated as a guest, rested by himself in a separate room. It is hard on Seki, too, to be kept here so many days and unable to return. Seki was that man's surname. But he is not so busy a man, and that is why he can stay here like this. More than Seki, it must be harder on you, brother, now that it has dragged on so long. Even if it is hard, nothing can be done. This is not like other matters. Lying there with my bed beside his, I talked with my brother in this way before sleep. In my brother's mind and in my own breast, there was the thought that father could not, in any case, be saved. There was also the thought, if he cannot be saved anyway? We were like children waiting for a parent to die. But as children, we hesitated to put that into words. And each of us understood very well what the other was thinking. Father still seems to think he will recover, my brother said to me. And in truth, there were moments when it did seem so. Whenever someone from the neighborhood came to inquire after him, father would insist on seeing the person. And when he did, he would always speak with regret of not having been able to invite them to celebrate my graduation. At the same time, he would sometimes add something about what he would do once his illness was cured. It is just as well that the celebration for your graduation came to nothing. When my time came, it was miserable enough. With these words, my brother prodded my memory. I recalled, with a bitter smile, the disorderly scene of that time, stirred up by drink, the sight, too, of father forcing food and sake upon people, went unpleasantly before my eyes. We were not brothers especially close in affection. When we were little, we quarreled often, and I, being younger, was always the one who ended by crying. The difference in the courses we studied after entering school had also arisen entirely from a difference in our natures. While I was at the university, and especially after I came into contact with Sensei, I used to look at my brother from a distance and think of him as animal-like. I had not seen him for a long time, and besides, he had been far away. In time and in distance, he was never a near presence to me. Yet now, when after so long we had come together like this, a gentle feeling between brothers rose naturally from somewhere within us. The circumstances themselves were also a great cause of it. There, by the pillow of the father common to us both, that father who was about to die, my brother and I shook hands. "What will you do from now on?" my brother asked. In answer, I put to him a question that was quite different from his. What, after all, is to become of the family's property? I do not know. Father has still said nothing at all. But even if you speak of property as money, it cannot amount to very much. Mother, for her part, was also troubled about the reply from Sensei. Has the letter still not come? Chapter 15. Who in the world is this Sensei? Sensei you keep talking about. My brother asked. Didn't I explain it the other day? I answered. Although I myself had asked him a question, I felt irritated with my brother, who forgot what others told him almost as soon as he heard it. I did hear it, certainly, but what my brother meant in the end was that even when he heard, he could not understand. From my point of view, there was no need to force him to understand, Sensei. And yet I was angry. I thought again that my brother was showing that familiar side of himself because I respected someone to the extent of calling him Sensei, Sensei. My brother assumed that the man must necessarily be someone of renown. At the very least, he supposed he must be something like a university professor, a man without a name, a man who did nothing. Where could the value of such a person lie? In this respect, my brother's way of thinking was exactly the same as father's. But whereas father jumped at once to the conclusion that a man was idle because he could do nothing, my brother let fall a tone implying that if a man had abilities enough to do something and yet loafed about, then he could only be a worthless fellow. An egoist is no good. To mean to live without doing anything is a shameless way of thinking. A man must make the utmost use of whatever talents he has. Otherwise, it is false. I wanted to turn to my brother and ask him back whether he really understood the meaning of the word egoist that he was using. Still, if thanks to him you get a position, then that will at least be a good thing. Father, too, seems pleased, does he not? Afterward, my brother said this. As long as no clear letter came from Sensei, I could neither believe it nor muster the courage to say it aloud. Now that mother, through her quick assumption, had gone and spread it to everyone in that way, I could no longer suddenly deny it. Without waiting to be urged by mother, I kept looking out for a letter from Sensei, and I prayed that in that letter there might somehow be written the matter of a livelihood, of food and clothing, just as they all imagined. Before my father, who was nearing death, before my mother, who prayed that he might be given even a little peace of mind, before my brother, who spoke as though a man were not human unless he worked, before my sister's husband, my uncle, my aunt, and the rest, I had to trouble my nerves over something to which I myself was not the least attached. When father vomited a strange yellow matter, I remembered the danger of which Sensei and his wife had once spoken to me. Looking at mother's face as she said, "He has been lying down so long like this, his stomach is bound to go bad as well," I found tears rising to my eyes before that woman who knew nothing. When my brother and I met in the sitting room, he said, "Did you hear?" What he meant was, had I heard what the doctor had said to him as he was leaving? Even without waiting for an explanation, I understood perfectly what he meant. "Have you any intention of coming back here and managing the house?" my brother asked, looking at me. I made no answer. Mother alone will not be able to do anything, my brother said again. My brother looked upon me as though I were someone who might just as well smell the scent of the earth and rot away here. If all you want is to read books, you can do that perfectly well in the country too. And besides, there would be no need to work, so it would suit you exactly. It would be more proper for you to come back, brother, I said. How could I possibly do such a thing? My brother rejected it in a single breath. Within him, there was overflowing the will to go out into the world and work from now on. If you refuse, then perhaps we must ask Uncle to look after things. But even then, Mother will have to be taken in by one side or the other. Whether Mother herself would move from here or not is already a very great question. Even before Father had died, we brothers spoke together in this way about what would come after his death. Chapter 16. Father began at times to wander in his speech. I have failed, General Nogi. I am truly ashamed beyond words. Yes, I too shall follow immediately after. He would suddenly let fall such words as these. Mother was frightened by them. She wanted, as much as possible, to gather us all by Father's pillow. To the invalid, too, who when in his right mind was always feeling lonely, this seemed to be his wish, especially if he looked about the room and did not see Mother. Father would always ask, "Where is Omitsu?" Even when he did not ask, his eyes told it. I often rose and went to call Mother. When Mother came into the sick room, leaving whatever task she had been doing unfinished, and said, "Do you want something?" there were times when Father merely gazed at her face and said nothing at all. Then again, he would speak of something entirely unrelated. At times, he would suddenly say some gentle thing like, "Omitsu, you too have taken much care of me." Before such words, Mother would always fill with tears, and after that, she seemed always to remember by contrast the father of former days, when he had still been strong. He says such pitiful things now, but in those days he could be very harsh indeed. Mother told us how Father had once struck her across the back with a broom. My brother and I, who had heard that story many times before, received Mother's words now in a wholly different mood, as though they were some memorial of Father. Although Father gazed at the shadow of death dimly reflected before his eyes, he still spoke nothing resembling a last testament. Shouldn't we ask him about anything that ought to be known while there is still time? My brother said, looking at me. Yes, perhaps. I answered, I thought it doubtful whether it would be right for the sick man if we ourselves were to bring up such a thing. Unable to decide, the two of us ended by consulting Uncle. Uncle, too, only tilted his head. If there is something he wishes to say, it would be a pity for him to die without saying it, and yet to press him from our side may also be wrong. In the end, the matter trailed away without conclusion. Then, before long, a stupor came over him. Mother, who as usual knew nothing, mistook it for ordinary sleep and was rather pleased. If only he can sleep peacefully like that, It is easier for those beside him, too. She said, at times father opened his eyes and suddenly asked what had become of someone or other. That someone was always limited to a person who had been sitting there only a little while before. Within father's consciousness, there seemed to be dark places and bright places. Like a white thread, sewing through darkness, appeared to continue at intervals across a certain distance. It was no wonder that mother mistook that stupor for ordinary sleep. Before long, his tongue began to grow more and more tangled. Even when he tried to say something, the end of it would trail off indistinctly, so that often we could not make out what he meant. And yet, when he began to speak, he raised his voice so strongly that one would never have thought him a dying man. We, of course, had to raise our voices more than ever, bringing our mouths close to his ear. Does it feel good when your head is cooled? Yes. With the nurse beside me, I changed father's water pillow and then placed a fresh ice bag, newly filled with ice, upon his head, while the sharply broken, jagged fragments of ice settled within the bag. I held it gently in place outside father's bald brow. At that moment, my brother came in along the corridor and silently placed a piece of mail in my hand. Stretching out my free left hand to receive it, I was immediately struck by something strange. Compared with an ordinary letter, it was far heavier. It had not even been put in a normal envelope, nor was it of a size that could have fit into one. It had been wrapped in handshi paper, and the sealed edge had been carefully pasted down. The moment I took it from my brother's hand, I saw at once that it was registered mail. Turning it over, I found Sensei's name written there in his modest hand. Since my hands were occupied and I could not open it at once, I slipped it, for the moment, into my breast. Chapter 17. That day, the invalid seemed particularly bad. When I rose from my seat, meaning to go to the privy, my brother, whom I met in the corridor, challenged me in the tone of a sentry. "Where are you going?" His condition seems a little strange, so we must stay near him as much as possible. I thought so too. Leaving the letter still in my breast, I returned again to the sick room. Father opened his eyes and asked Mother the names of the people standing there in a row. As Mother explained, one by one, that one is so-and-so, this one is so-and-so. Father nodded each time. When he did not nod, Mother would raise her voice and press him again. "It is so-and-so. Do you understand? I am truly obliged for all your kindness." Father said this. Then he fell once more into a stupor. Those gathered around his pillow watched the invalid in silence for a while. Before long, one of them rose and went out into the next room. Then another rose. I too, as the third, finally left my place and came to my own room. I had one purpose: to open the postal packet I had just put into my breast. There was no reason why I could not have done it by the sick man's pillow. But the amount written in it was far too great. There was no possibility of reading it through. There, at a sitting, I stole a special moment for that purpose. I tore open the tough wrapping paper as though scratching it apart. What came out looked like manuscript, written neatly within ruled lines, vertical and horizontal, and it had been folded into quarters for convenience. In sealing, I bent back the stiff Western paper, which had taken a fold, and flattened it so that it would be easy to read. My heart was startled at the thought of what this great quantity of paper and ink was about to tell me. At the same time, the sick room troubled my mind. I had a foreboding that before I finished reading this writing, indeed, before I even had much time to begin, Father would certainly have some change, or at the very least, I would surely be called by my brother, or my mother, or else my uncle. I could not bring myself to read calmly what Sensei had written. Restless and uneasy, I read only the first page. That page was written as follows: When, at that time, you pressed me about my past, I, who had not the courage to answer, believe that I now possess the freedom to tell it plainly before you. But that freedom is no more than a worldly freedom, one which, while I wait for your return to Tokyo, will once more be lost. Accordingly, if I do not use it while I am able, I shall forever lose the chance to teach you my past as an indirect experience within your own mind. If that happens, then the words I promised you so firmly at that time will become nothing but a lie. I have therefore been compelled to set down with the brush what ought to have been spoken by word of mouth. When I had read that far, for the first time, I understood clearly why this long document had been written. As for some means of food and clothing, some position for me, I had believed from the outset that Sensei had no thought of writing about such a thing. But why had Sensei, who disliked taking up the brush, come to write out that matter at such length and show it to me? Why could he not wait until I returned to Tokyo? Now that freedom has come, he speaks, yet that freedom, in turn, must again be lost forever. Repeating this within my heart, I struggled to understand its meaning. Suddenly, I was seized by uneasiness. I tried to go on, reading further. At that very moment, from the direction of the sick room, I heard my brother's loud voice calling me. Startled again, I sprang to my feet. I rushed down the corridor toward the place where they all were. I was prepared for the final moment to have come at last upon Father. Chapter 18. Before I knew it, the doctor had come into the sick room with the intention of making the patient as comfortable as possible. He was about to try another enema. The nurse, to recover from the fatigue of the previous night, was sleeping in another room. My brother, unused to such things, had risen and was moving about in confusion. When he saw my face, he said only, "Give me a hand for a moment," and then took his seat again. I took my brother's place and held the oiled paper beneath Father's body. Father's condition seemed to ease a little. The doctor, who remained by the pillow for about 30 minutes, confirmed the result of the enema, then said he would come again, and went home. As he left, he made a point of telling us to call him at once if anything should happen. I left the sick room, which still seemed as though something might happen at any moment, and tried once more to read Sensei's letter. But I could not feel calm in the least. The moment I sat down before the desk, I felt certain that again my brother would call me in a loud voice, and I trembled at the fear that if I were called this time, it would be the end. I turned the pages of Sensei's letter without meaning. My eyes saw the carefully ordered characters set within their ruled frames, but I had no leisure to read them. I scarcely had even the leisure to pick out fragments. I opened the pages, one after another, all the way to the last, then was about to fold them again and lay them as they had been upon the desk. At that moment, by chance, a single line near the conclusion caught my eye. By the time this letter falls into your hands, I shall no longer be in this world. I shall, beyond doubt, be dead. I started. It felt as though my breast, which until then had been fluttering in agitation, suddenly hardened. All at once, I turned the pages back in the other direction, and I read backward at the rate of about one sentence to a page. In that instant, trying to know what I had to know, I attempted to pierce through the flickering letters with my eyes. What I wished to know then was only whether Sensei was alive or dead. Sensei's past, that dim past which he had once promised to tell me of, such a thing was utterly useless to me now. Turning the pages backward, I impatiently folded up this long letter, which did not readily grant me the knowledge I needed. Once more, I went to the door of the sick room to see Father's condition. The scene by the sick man's pillow was unexpectedly quiet. I beckoned Mother, who sat there with a weary face full of helplessness, and asked, "How is he?" Mother answered, "He seems to be holding on a little for now." I leaned my face before Father's eyes and asked, "Well, after the enema, do you feel a little better?" Father nodded. Quite distinctly, he said, "Thank you." Father's mind was not nearly so clouded as I had thought. Again, I withdrew from the sick room and returned to my own room. There, looking at the clock, I examined the train timetable. Suddenly I stood up, retied my sash, and thrust Sensei's letter into my sleeve. Then I went out from the back entrance to the front. Like a man beside himself, I ran to the doctor's house. I meant to ask him plainly whether Father would hold out for another 2 or 3 days. I meant to beg him to keep him alive somehow, by injections or by anything at all. Unluckily, the doctor was away. I had no time to stand there waiting for his return. I had no composure to do so. At once, I had a rickshaw hurried to the station. Leaning a scrap of paper against the wall of the station, I wrote a letter in pencil to Mother and my brother. The letter was very brief, but thinking it better than running off, without a word, I asked the rickshaw man to deliver it quickly to the house. Then, with the momentum of my desperate resolve, I leapt aboard the train for Tokyo. In the roaring, thundering third-class carriage, I took Sensei's letter once more from my sleeve and at last read it through from beginning to end.